young scholars, this is your video for the Neolithic Revolution. Now, if you haven't watched the vocabulary video for this unit yet, you should pause this one now and do that first. Key vocabulary terms that were covered in that video will pop up at the bottom of the screen during this video, but you should definitely have that background information first. You ready? Here we go. So this unit is on the Neolithic Revolution. The first thing we need to understand before we even broach this topic is, what is a revolution? That word revolution you've probably heard before, and it's going to come up again and again in your social studies classes, not only this year, but in 10th grade as well. A revolution is a major change. Not just a little change that happens, but a major change, a big change. The Neolithic Revolution is going to be a major change in the way that people live their lives, the way that humans live their lives. So before we get to the actual point of change, we need to rewind and go back several thousand years to an era or a time period called the Paleolithic era, or the Paleolithic time period. That word Paleolithic, if you break it down, literally means old stone. Old stone. So the Paleolithic era is the Old Stone Age, or the Old Stone era. During this time period, humans were nomadic, meaning they moved from place to place. They didn't live in a house and stay in one spot. They were nomadic. They were nomads. Why were they nomadic? Not just for fun. It was a matter of necessity. These people were hunters and gatherers, meaning in order to survive and in order to find their food, they needed to hunt animals, and they needed to gather it, meaning search the land that they were in at the moment to find whatever kind of fruits or vegetables or berries were growing there. Okay? So hunters and gatherers were nomadic because they had to follow their food source no matter where it went. If you stayed in one spot for too long, you would use up all the animals and plants that were in that area, and then it was of no use to you. If you stayed there, you would die. So it was out of necessity that these Paleolithic people were hunters and gatherers, and they were nomadic. Now, let's get to the point where we talk about this major change, the Neolithic Revolution. The word Neolithic has that same phrase in it, lithic, meaning stone. So what does Neo mean? Neo means new. The Neolithic age was the new stone age. Paleolithic old, Neolithic new. The new stone age was much different from the Paleolithic age. There was a major difference between these two time periods. One of the biggest factors and reasons for this was because of the development of agriculture. Now, agriculture is just a fancy word for farming. You know what a farm is, right? That's agriculture, growing crops. Now, humans eventually found the ability to grow their crops. They didn't need to search for it anymore. They didn't need to look. They figured out how to grow it themselves, where they wanted and what they wanted. So they had some measure of control through agriculture. There's one particular kind of agriculture that could come up on tests or in readings that you might see during this unit. It's called slash and burn farming. It's a type of agriculture where it kind of just is exactly what it sounds like. Farmers or people would go out into a field, and in order to get it ready for growing crops and for agriculture, they would slash down or cut down any of the trees or bushes or brush that was there, cut it down, and then burn it. They would set it on fire. Now that sounds counterproductive, right? But it was a controlled fire. It was only limited to the area where they wanted to prepare it for agriculture. And then actually what's left behind, you'll see this if you ever use a fire pit. What's left behind after a fire dies out is ashes, right? It's that sooty, fine material that's left after a fire. That is actually very good for growing crops. It helps make the soil more fertile. It's like more minerals for the soil, and it's better for agriculture. So even though cutting things down and burning them might sound counterproductive, for agriculture, it's actually a really good thing. And that's what people during the Neolithic Revolution used to start growing their crops and to produce agriculture. Now there's another element to the Neolithic Revolution. Not only were people growing their own crops now through agriculture, they were also using something called domestication. Humans during the Neolithic Revolution were domesticating plants and animals. Basically, domestication just means to train a plant or an animal to make it do what you want it to do. So let's look at this when it comes to plants and agriculture. During the Paleolithic era, before, humans were kind of just chasing after their food. They weren't training it to do what they wanted it to do. They were finding crops wherever they could that was growing naturally. They hadn't trained it. Now in the Neolithic Revolution, they're planting crops. They're kind of growing whatever they want to grow, where they want to grow it. They've trained it. You might know this, or it might be more familiar to you if we use an example like, take any plant. Let's say tomatoes. I love to grow tomatoes in my garden. If I want to grow bigger and bigger tomato plants every year, I'm going to save the seeds from those really big tomatoes and plant those the next year. So that hopefully over the course of years, I'll get bigger and bigger tomatoes. That's another way you can train plants. Not just by planting it, but choosing the traits that you want in that plant. When it comes to animals, it's a little bit easier to understand. If you have a pet at home, a cat or a dog, they are domesticated. They're not wild. They're not doing what they want to do. They're domesticated. They're trained. They're doing, most of the time, what you want them to do. All of these factors coming together, agriculture and domestication of plants and animals, are the keys to the Neolithic Revolution. Because of these changes, because of agriculture, people could stay in one place and they didn't have to be nomadic anymore. They didn't have to chase or follow their food source. They were training it, growing it, and raising it right where they wanted to in one single place. We call that kind of lifestyle a sedentary lifestyle. Sedentary means not moving very much, staying in one place. So it's kind of the opposite of nomadic. Nomadic means moving around from place to place. Sedentary means staying in one place. And humans had to do this out of necessity during the Neolithic Revolution. They kind of had to stay in one place. If you're going to grow, you might know this, if you try to grow a garden, plant some seeds, watch that plant start to grow, but then you take a vacation for a month and no one takes care of that plant, it's going to die, right? Because you were nomadic and you moved away, that plant suffered and it wasn't useful to you. On a larger scale, not just with one plant, but with a whole farm, a whole field of crops, humans had to stay in one place to take care of it, to make sure that those crops grew and it was useful for them. Same thing with the animals. To train the animals to do useful things, they had to stay in one place. And they actually used the animals to their advantage, right? They used their animals for agriculture. They would pull plows, they would pull carts. No longer were animals just something that roamed around that you had to catch in order to eat. You could actually raise them, eat some of them, and use some of them to help you do work around your town or your city. What's important to know about the Neolithic Revolution is that it leads to the development of cities and civilizations. Because people are staying in one place, those communities are growing and growing, people are getting healthier, and it leads to civilizations. So that's it for the Neolithic Revolution. It's kind of a teaser into our next video, which will be aspects of civilization.